Hello, this is Mr. Grunhout, and I wanted to show you how to make a graph in Google Sheets. So once you're signed into your Google account, in the upper right-hand corner, you can click on Google Apps. Then you can click on Sheets. Then if you have a specific thing you're looking for, you can open something from one of their templates, or you can just select blank. All right? Once you have this here, of course, you're going to want some data. And I have some data from an experiment that we did in class. And here's what that data looks like. Students were looking at the survival time of different bubbles that they blew. And they had to keep them alive for as long as they could. And they were looking at this to emulate survivorship curves that we see in nature. So in the first experiment, this was population 1, so I definitely want to title my graph, my sheet, this is survivorship. Lab. And here's my original data. And of course, you can add, if you want to add some more workspace, it's easy to do so down here at the bottom. You can click on plus and add another empty sheet, and another sheet, and another sheet, and you can rename these whatever you like. So if you have multiple trials of the same experiment, for example, you want your data here, and maybe you want, say, population 1 graph here, population 1 graph here. You want to maintain your data. The first sheet, that's easy to do. We can just call this one data. Okay, so you can rename those. It's a way to keep your information organized. Once you have your data collected, of course, you want to make sure it's organized by X and Y axis. So the X axis is your independent variable. It's the thing that I control, is the independent variable, and that will be in column A. The dependent variable should be in column B. So we have the amount of time, percent of time that has passed, and the percent of bubbles, right? Percent that survived that long. Once you have your two sets of data, your X and your Y axis, then you want to graph them and you want to include the title. That'll bring that into your X and Y axis labels in your graph. To do this, you can go and insert a graph, but another way to do this that's a little bit more efficient maybe, so here's a graph here, it's your chart, or you can insert a chart from here. Another option is to hit explore. And this way Google will kind of take a look at your data and like, well, I think maybe you might want to go with this, right? And so here are some examples, right, of graphing this data set, right? And here is a line graph and a bar graph, right? And a line graph with filled data. Unfortunately, none of these are what I'm looking for, but if that's what you're looking for, that's a good way to go about it. So I'll show you another way. I go to graph, right? And it puts in kind of what it thinks it should do, but I can always change it here, right? So suggested, and this is what I was looking for. I want the scatter because I don't really want to connect these dots, and I want to see the plots, the points plotted as they lay, right? And so here's my graph. It's pretty good. Check my axes, make sure they're in the right spot. I want X is my time. That's what I controlled. What depended on that was the survivorship of those bubbles. Right? So now you have your basic graph, and you can do some simple things here. I don't want to take up too much time, but in gist is if I go under customize, I can change the style of the graph. This is where you make it look nice and presentable to people. Change the background color. You can change the border color, right? Whatever you want to do here. Then you can also change the font, just depending on your audience and what you're trying to do with your graph. You can change the title if this doesn't look good to you. I can be more specific here. This is, we did 3 different tests, so this would be population 1. And the percent survival for that population. Right? Fine there. series, this would be if you had multiple series, so you could have multiple sets of data on one graph. Can't one right now. You could also insert a trend line on that data to see how linear is this, right? So it looks pretty linear, but once we put a line on it, we see that that's linear. We can also get the slope of that line. We get more into it if we insert that trend line. That's another discussion. Okay? That's your R squared. Okay? So the next thing we can do is we can, if there's a legend again, let's get a little bit messy. So stay out of that for now. The horizontal and vertical axis, if say this happens to be a logarithmic relationship, so if I want to see my vertical axis in a logarithmic fashion, then that's how it'll look. Then grid lines, if you want to just increase the frequency of these lines across your screen, you can change the major and minor grid line counts, right? So if I change this to say 1, right, there's not very many. If I change it back to 10 here, if I want more than that, I can increase this, say I have some in between, right, or more so here, right? So once you're happy with your graph and you think it shows your data the way you'd like it to be seen, then the next thing you want to do is put this somewhere where people can see it. Once you're good, you can click on dots up here, and then you can publish it to the internet. You can download it. Probably the most common thing here would be to copy your chart. That way you can put it into a report, say in a Google Doc. Right? So you copy your chart. Now it's copied. I can go ahead and paste it. That's the basics on how to create and share a graph in Google Sheet.